Blog Talk Radio.
Carol the Coach. Sex, love, and relationships. We talk about it here.
Carol the Coach. Compassion with contemporary relevance.
I am a psychotherapist. I can be your personal life coach, and I can help you with your issues. There are no problems too small or too big. You can talk about anything.
Speaker, columnist, radio TV host, and commentator. Carol the Coach brings messages of wellness and empowerment within reach of everyday people every day.
Almost 5 years ago, I lost my soulmate in an accident. He was killed in a plane crash. Life just, for me, has seemed to stop.
There are groups all over the city. I teach one. It is a specific way to start thinking so that you shift how you see the world, which then shifts your energy, and then you feel better and you actually see things differently.
Carol the Coach. Always available, too, at carolthecoach.com.
Now, I've got Russell on the line.
I'm 47 years old. I'm a truck driver. I'm married. I have a wife in San Francisco.
Okay.
I haven't been home in 6 months. My thing is, I don't know if I have a sex addiction or what the problem is. Why do I want what I can't have? And as soon as I can have it, I don't want it anymore.
You're right on target when you say, I don't know if I have a sexual addiction. Well, guess what? Yes, you do. And you know what? That's my specialty, Russell. So you're at the right place. Continue.
I meet women online, and I'm in a different part of the country. I travel all 48 states, so I love sex.
I hear self-esteem issues. You never felt good enough, and you didn't feel like you were getting what you should have then, and you're reenacting that now. Do you want to change that about yourself?
You get what you need. Oh, yeah. You know, that's the $20 million question. Do you want to change that about yourself? Hey, I'm Carol Jurgensen-Sheep, and I am so happy to see you tonight. I'm back from Florida, and I've got a riveting show, a show that I needed, so I reached out to a specialist who I knew would be incredibly adept at helping me to learn more about the subject. Yep, Carol the Coach here, and when I want to learn something, then I want you to learn it too. This is Sex Help with Carol the Coach, and we talk about sex addiction, we talk about partner betrayal, we talk about couples relationships. We just do it all. And tonight, I'm going to be talking with Gary Katz. And he's got a colleague that I am so happy to also be interviewing, named Jeff Aldeson. And they are in the same practice, and they are working with gay men. And I remember that Gary said to our listserv, he said, I'm going to be starting another sex, love, and relationship show, not to mention intimacy, and I'm going to be doing that in group format. And I thought, I really need to get with Gary and find out what are the issues. And I do mean issues for gay men that may be similar or different than straight men. I thought I knew, based on my limited experience of working with gay men or lesbian women, and especially with problematic sexual behavior. The couples I seem to work with, I work with them just like I do heterosexuals. And I see 98% of the same dynamics. And then I thought, is that true? And if it's not true, then I better have more information and awareness and enlightenment, if you will, as to those nuances or differences so that, I can do better work, right? And that's what I want to do. I want to do no harm, and I want to do the best work possible. So they're going to be on in just a couple of minutes, and we're going to be talking about working with the gay population in general, both in regards to intimacy and also in regards to problematic sexual behavior. So I've been missing you, my listening audience. I've been in Florida, and I've been snowbirding it. Many of you know I'm the grandmother of podcasting and sex addiction. I was the first one to start a podcast, and I feel so fortunate because, as you well know, there are hundreds of incredible podcasts now. And I want to kind of tell you what I'm doing. I just got home. I'm here in Indianapolis, and I'm catching up. I had to file over 200 chart notes, and that in itself is no easy feat. And, of course, it was just getting reorganized and readjusted. And while I was in Florida, I started a Help Them Heal couples group. It's a 9-week group, although I think next time I will double it. And we're going to help them heal, but more importantly, we're doing group work and teaching about how to get healthy. And I feel so much gratitude for that. I really do. And what I know is that when you put a group together, and honestly, certainly this group is exceptional because they already want the skills, right? I mean, they're not just fresh out of discovery. They've been doing this a while, and they want the skills to get healthier. They know they deserve that. And so today I was teaching them the Ford isomorphic pathway to intimacy, self-intimacy, that is, which is all about sitting in the distress and comfortable with it because you balance that with constructive compassion. And that's a mindfulness term. And this technique came from Daryl Ford, and it's very, very, very powerful. And I feel so fortunate to be able to teach it as well as to see the incredible work that occurs when somebody goes down that pathway and says, I am going to make a difference in my own life. There's no doubt, they say, that when you're doing some teaching, the more critical part is that you learn from your students. And I learn from people every single day. So I'm doing that for an hour and a half on Tuesdays. I got my Help or Heal group, which will be done in another 6 or 7 weeks. And I rotate that. I take in new members. And then I have my partners group. And my partners group is for partners that want post-traumatic growth. I'm not saying they're not in some crisis management. I'm not saying they're not in some distress. They may be feeling anxiety. They may be feeling depression. But ultimately, they want a sense of restoration in their own life and to feel better about themselves. So I am always more than thrilled to be able to provide them that. And I always say in terms of my own model, the Early Recovery Couples Empathy Model, that you have to make a choice to get healthy. You have to make a choice to get better. It doesn't necessarily happen, although sometimes it does. But more often than not, you make the choice and you shift the way you think about things. Because we all know that old adage, when you change the way you look at things, the things around you change. Coaching principle, isn't it? And so I know in my Help or Heal group today, one of the men said, I got to learn how not to take things personal. And he says, that came from that 4 Agreements thing. And the 4 Agreements is one of the most powerful books that you can read in an afternoon. And it gives you 4 commandments, if you will. I think it's the Peruvian Bible. And one of them is don't take things personally. If you cause some conflict, own it. But after that, don't take it personally. Do something about it. And that is one of my Carol the Coachisms. There is no doubt that my Carol the Coachism is don't take things personal because you'll stay in shame. It's actually one of the mantras in my 7 principles for dealing with conflict. And that is, you don't want to take anything personal. You want to own how you may have fed into the problem, but then you want to take accountability and not let it get to you. Because if you let it get to you, it immobilizes you. So I'm not saying you can't have a healthy dose of guilt. We all know that you can. But to be immobilized from the issue renders you helpless. We don't like that. Another shame resiliency principle is I won't give him or her the power to make me feel blank. And that's always a very important mantra for somebody to be doing. They're taking their power back. They're saying, I am not going to give my power away like that. Another shame resiliency skill, we're always looking for mindful skill sets, right? Helpful skill sets, is that's about my past. That is not about who I am today. Now be thinking about that. What would your mantra be? What would you want your mantra to be if you were able to live by things that made you feel better, right? I mean, that's what it's all about. And I truly believe that when we know better, we do better, and that we have to shift our thinking. For instance, I know that if a man stays in shame, he's not as effective as holding space for the partner. What I'm going to be finding out later on when I speak with Gary and Jeff, I'm going to be trying to figure out if gay men ascribe to some of the same coping principles, or do they have extra layers of shame that get in the way of healthy living, healthy sexuality, and healthy relationships. So I literally do really want to welcome to the show two men that I reached out to because they were experts in this field. And, you know, that's what I really believe in, is that we need experts in the field. So Gary Katz, is it Katz or Katz?
It's Katz, K-A-T-Z, Katz, like multiple felines.
There you go.
And it's also a Katz who's not I don't think I would say expert. I don't mean that with humility. I don't feel that moniker applies. But thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. And you wanted your friend to be a part of this because he is such a skilled practitioner. Is he running the group with you?
He actually runs the group. I don't. He's a friend and a colleague. He's a therapist at the Center for Intimacy Recovery, and Jeff Aldeson, and he's the one who leads our group and has been doing it for the past 2 years.
Wow, Jeff. And for any of you that end up seeing this on YouTube, you'll really love both of these offices because they speak to the background of each of these men. So, Jeff, welcome to the show. I don't think we've ever personally met, have we?
We have not. It's nice to meet you, Susan. Good evening.
Carol.
Sorry.
I thought he was making a joke. It is absolutely okay. And, you know, here's what I know. I'm running this IRCM certification. It's an early recovering couples empathy model certification for couples. And in my estimation, when I work with gay men and gay couples, I realize that they do have a background that makes their lives a lot different. There's usually multiple layers of trauma, complex post-traumatic stress, and that shame is a lot thicker. But when I'm doing it with couples, they seem to exhibit the same symptomatology of a heterosexual couple where there's sex addiction and partner betrayal. So I contacted Gary and said, I want to find out more about this. So when you know better, you do better. And he was cited as an expert, and he cited you as an expert. So can I ask you some candid questions?
Sure, but I'm with Gary. I don't consider myself an expert, but I'll let you know what I do know. Happy to share.
All right. Humble, too. Well, the thing is, if you've been running a group for a couple of years for gay men, and if I understand, that group is on sex, relationships, and intimacy, right?
Yes.
And so are the men in your group, through the center, are the men in your group in coupleship, or are they searching for relationships?
They're both. It's very mixed. And the age range is 29 to 73.
Uh-huh.
So there's a broad spectrum of experience. And that makes a lot of difference generationally in terms of acceptance, in terms of younger people understanding that marriage was a possibility for them, where older people, it was certainly not on the radar. In fact, you know, we gay men, I'm speaking for men specifically, not women,
right,
were a community that had to hammer out its identity in dance floors and back rooms and after hours clubs. So the idea of meeting your partner at a church picnic was not going to happen. So it's a very different. We grew up in the same culture. So, you know, we had the same model for successful relationships of mom, dad, man, woman, white picket fence, 2 kids, you know, heteronormative modeling. But then it wasn't allowed for us. And so we had to find other ways to do that.
Well, I get that. In some ways, that mirrors sex addiction for heterosexual males because they're not in the open about that. So they're showing up in seedy places and after hours and underground, but they don't carry the same type of shame. Gary, would you agree with that, or would you say, no, Carol, I see it differently?
I see it different. What did you want to say, Joe?
I see it differently, too, because, you know, when you say seedy places, we celebrated those places. We celebrated our identity. How wonderful that we could have that freedom to connect in that way when we weren't accepted anywhere else.
Yeah, I think that there's a fundamental maybe difference between this, to answer your question and you build on what Jeff is saying, is that gay boys going into gay men had to seek out these places just to be able to kind of act, not even to act out sexually, but just to be.
To be themselves.
Yeah, just to be themselves. So it felt that's a little different than somebody who has the opportunity to be themselves but has created a secret life through a coping mechanism, right? Like sex addiction is a coping mechanism to, sexualized feelings. If it's too overwhelming, too upsetting, trauma, so my feelings get sexualized. So I go and act out sexually to either disconnect from myself or others, to avoid uncomfortable feelings. But something in the experience is actually about creating connection. So there's a difference, I think, in that. And so they may have been in like 2 different seedy places, but what they were seeking, I think, even although both were sexualized, they were seeking connection versus seeking disconnection and sex addiction. And I also think that, I think that's a big difference. And that leads into why there's a different relationship to sex, maybe in the gay male community than in the heterosexual community, which then impacts both sex addiction and betrayal and dynamics in relationships, which I'm sure you've seen with some of your couples.
Well, absolutely. And so I clearly hear what you're saying, and that makes a lot of sense, although I certainly meet men in general who have an identity or a persona that, as you may have indicated, is somewhat medicating, but it's also who they want to be until they don't. Now, when they come clean, they also feel some relief, because most heterosexual men have wanted to stop over and over and over and over again, and they either didn't have the tools or the compulsion was greater than their desire until they got recovery tools. So then your group is for men exploring Jeff, their sexuality and their manhood, and maybe even some maladaptive coping mechanisms too that they use to medicate the pain. And
there's some. My group specifically is not a recovery group. Mm-hmm. So there's currently no one in there that identifies as having compulsive sexual behavior. Mm-hmm. Even though there is a member who has a husband, they're legally married, and he also has a boyfriend. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, these kind of non-traditional mm-hmm. relationships seem to be more readily acceptable in same-sex couples.
Can you explain why that is, Jeff?
I think there's a lot of different reasons why that is. I think, to quote a book that we're probably all familiar with, though I've never read, Men Are From Mars and Men Are From Mars. So we understand each other in a way. We understand how libidinous we can be, or how we might want some variety, and understand it with each other. There doesn't seem to be the same level of threat when two men in a relationship see someone that's attractive. They can agree on that rather than, were you looking at that person? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There seems to be an understanding of one's sexual motivation in a different way.
Well,
I
certainly.
Maybe, sorry, Karen, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I think that we have to step one step back even maybe, because I think what we touched on before is really important to really tease out, which is, and it happens in many cultures, if a culture is not accepted by the dominant culture, whether it's a religion or a race or a sexual orientation, then one of their reactions is either to try harder to be accepted or to be like, well, we can't be accepted by you. We don't need to follow your rules. And so that was one of the large reactions, I think, that happened in the gay community. That once we can't get married, it's either shameful or prohibited or not acceptable, illegal to be gay, then, well, we don't need to follow any of the rules. Like Jeff said, if we can't do husband, wife, house, white picket fence, children, and we're not accepted in that, then we don't have to buy into that storyline, and we can create our own, which is, and that shaped over time a different relationship to sex, so that what was the normal mainstream heterosexual path and relationship with sex and feelings about sex in heterosexual America, it got rejected by many parts of the gay community. And so embracing sex is a reaction to feeling disqualified because of sex. So maybe being more sexual, some parts might be like overtly, I don't say hypersexual because that fits into diagnosis, and that's not what I mean. Mm-hmm. But it means like overtly sexual, or, well, we're not even allowed to get married, so our relationships don't have to have the confinements or the structure of marriage because it's illegal until not long ago. So, for example, there's more merit, now that it is legal, there's more marriages that have agreements in the gay male community than maybe in the heterosexual community, even with as popular or a topic as polyamory now is even in the heterosexual community, but still you find more open relationships in the gay community or agreements between two men. So what is considered betrayal in a relationship like that is informed by all of that history, I think. And I think that's really important for clinicians to understand, because, a heterosexual couple comes into my office, your offices, we're open, we listen to where they're coming from, we treat them with, like we're trained to treat the person where they're at. Mm-hmm. But with the gay couple coming in, they may have a completely different arrangement, even if they do have nowadays the house and the white picket fence. And so being open to what that means and those implications are very different. They may be having an open relationship where they can both, they have a consensual agreement to have sex outside the relationship or not. So what betrayal becomes can be different.
Yes.
And I think that's part of what's really, really important to understand. And also, we know with betrayed partners, right, like their betrayal is caused by the harm that was done to them by their spouse or their partner. Mm-hmm. And often, if they're like most of us who have some level of not enoughness from our childhood, like, you know, who does escape without some level of like, I'm not enough, the current betrayal wounds hit older wounds, right, childhood wounds, and so it activates that. And I think with gay men, if their family didn't accept them and they had to keep secrecy, they couldn't even just be themselves. And there's such a wonderful book, Jeff and I were talking about it earlier, I'm sure you know it, Carol, called The Velvet Rage by Alan Downs. It's such a great book. It changed how I practice with everybody, not just gay men, because the foundation of like, if you have shame, if you're a young gay boy and you see you're different than your dad or the other boys at school, you don't think, oh, we're all different. We're all part of the rainbow. We're all God's creation. You don't think that. You think something's wrong with me, because developmentally children internalize difference as something's wrong with me. And then if you have to keep that secret, you have shame, internalized shame, something's wrong with me, plus secrecy, which that's a 1-2 punch for things like addiction or externalization of beauty and things like that. So that's the experience that he explains for young gay boys, but it's true with anybody. Like I had a client who had a birth defect on his forehead, and he felt different than all the other kids, and that created shame for him, and that led to things. Or a parent has passed away, or parents are divorced, you internalize the shame of that, and you keep it a secret. Or I had a client whose mother was a hoarder. He couldn't have his friends over. He internalized the shame. He had a secret. It was a breeding ground for addiction. So I think that also leads into then what it feels like for these couples in the relationships that are maybe different than working with a heterosexual couple.
Okay. And Jeff, you were going to add?
I was going to add from that book, The Velvet Rage, and Gary pretty much talked about it, but gay boys are used to keeping secrets from a very early age. They can't really tell their dads that they want to play with dolls or that they like other boys. They often pretend they like sports. And some of them do actually like sports. Mm-hmm. You know, nothing we're talking about is every relationship, every person's sexuality is as different as there are people. And with couples, of course, because I think likely the majority of couples, as we would expect them to value fidelity and trust, and even in open couples, gay or straight, I think the thing that's so hurtful that I've found as a clinician in infidelity is not the sex so much as the lying, the mistrust, the gaslighting. Mm-hmm. And so often I'll have gay male couples come to me for a consultation, then I'll start to work with them, and I'll ask them the negotiations of their relationship. Do you have an open relationship? And more often, several times, they have said, well, we have a don't ask, don't tell policy. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's an open relationship. I think that's an agreement to keep secrets. Mm-hmm. And secrets are corrosive.
I would agree with you 100%. Yeah, I would agree with you 100%. As a matter of fact, in the world of sexual betrayal, you know, partners hands down say, I would rather have the information than the lie.
Right.
And the research shows that over and over and over again, even though for many partners it's horrendous information.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. But it's not as bad as thinking, I think, I can't believe you did that, that's awful, is different than I can't believe how stupid I was.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. And it always boils down to what was wrong with me. Why would you have lied to me? I'm not good enough.
Right.
Yeah.
And the open relationships that I do see working are ones that negotiate and renegotiate and return to the conversation over and over again. Mm-hmm. They keep that conversation alive.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, they say that the number one tool for any relationship that promotes health and well-being is negotiation and compromise. And that changes, and that's fluid, right?
Exactly, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that whether in a same-sex couple or a heterosexual couple, it takes so much energy to good communication skills and clarity and being, you can't be a people pleaser because you have to be able to speak your truth. So you have to be authentic.
Mm-hmm.
And so like there's so many relational skills to really successfully do and, have an open relationship for anyone if that's something that people want. I had one couple, they worked for 4 years towards it. Just, it wasn't just they woke up one day and decided. That's very rare. Most people are going to it's like an impulse, or they talk about it for a little while, like just so they negotiate, renegotiate. But, it's hard. And I think something that Jeff mentioned earlier is true too, which is that sometimes people think they want it, whether they're same-sex or not same-sex, want to have something open because it's like I get my stability
mm-hmm.
and my structure, and then I have variety. There's something that's appealing about that. But when they really engage in it, they see this requires a lot more work than I thought. This isn't just like play. It requires really, really mature communication skills that I don't know. I don't have them. I don't think most people have. Some do, but I think many people don't have as good of communication skills as they might think.
Mm-hmm.
I think Gary and I were talking about this earlier, but I think one of the big differences between the two communities is that sexual imagery is so ubiquitous in the gay community. I can get together with friends at a bar and there'll be pornography playing on a screen behind the bar. No one's having sex, it's just there.
Mm-hmm.
There's a visual representation of sex almost everywhere.
Well, I do that.
In nightlife. I think what I said before, it's just the celebration of who we are. That's how we connected initially.
Yeah,
in the community.
Yeah, so for many, there's a relationship with porn that gay boys have, which is different because if you grow up in a community where you don't meet anyone like you, for many gay boys, the first place they ever saw that was pornography.
Sure. And it's very different now that everyone has access to it on their phone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a different relationship to pornography. And again, I'm not saying whether it's good or bad, but it starts differently. It starts as kind of I remember I forgot the movie that came out, but recently there'd been, I think, the first Asian American woman to win an Academy Award, right? So what was it like for Asian girls to see a woman who looked like them on the screen? That was a very validating experience. Or we have it with betrayed partners, right? I'm sure, Carol, anytime there's a new documentary or show that has horrific betrayal in it, half the betrayed partners I know run to watch it because even though it's painful and triggering, it validates, they see someone on the screen who's feeling the way they felt, and even though that's painful, it's validating.
Mm-hmm.
And representation is so important.
Yeah.
So how do you think it's changed, and has it gotten healthier or more overt?
Well, what's your definition of healthier?
Where there aren't lies, and there is more compromise and negotiation, and there's more communication just amongst community.
Well, I think certainly, like I said before, representation is so important. There's more representation, and so even if some little same-sex attracted boys or girls are not accepted by their church or their family or their school or their community, TV, they can see that there are places where they are accepted, that they are represented. For years, we only, representation is so important all across the board, like Gary said. The Asian community seeing themselves represented, African American communities, etc. So now that there are gay characters on the screen, those kids who grow up not accepted know that there is someplace they can be accepted. In terms of sexuality, think that's different, and it's so individual. It's you know, and I do think that we all grew up in the same culture. We all grew up watching the same movies and seeing the same commercials. Generally,
The Love Boat, you mean? Saturday Night, The Love Boat, followed by Fantasy Island?
I didn't see that.
No? Or Dallas, followed by Knots Landing?
Didn't watch those either.
Okay.
But
I get what you're saying, and
the
absolutely.
majority of people, I think, try to mimic that. And when it doesn't work, they look for alternatives.
Well, you know, you said that, and I'm thinking, you know, I was 39 when I met my husband, and we got married a year later. So I was single until I was almost 40. And I said I was the poster child for that, despite the fact that my entire community had been married maybe once or twice, and divorced. And I believe when you don't have shame attached to something, and saying that I was the poster child for it, you know, made me different than another woman who'd say, I just can't find anybody. There's something wrong with me. I don't know what it is, you know. Now, again, that is not the same thing as being gay or lesbian at all. But I do think it has to do with a shift. And what you're saying is that it's a long time coming, and it's not even near where it could be, should be, can be. But there has been a shift. And it's freeing up people to be themselves, express themselves, communicate, all that stuff we said was healthy, right?
Yeah, I think, you know, one of the biggest things I see in the world where there's sex addiction or secrecy around sex, especially with men, is people pleasing, like being afraid to be authentic and who you are. And so, you know, and the way that I was taught that by some of my mentors is like stuffing your feelings. And it could be about a small thing. It doesn't have to be like a life choice, but it could be, you know, what do you want for dinner tonight? Italian, Chinese? Okay, whatever you want, honey. And so it's like a micro stuff, a little stuff of your feelings. And then those build up into resentment, and that takes into entitlement, and that leads to the acting out. And so there's a direct relationship between not being able to either know your feelings or share your feelings, and then it coming out sideways. And for many men, whether gay or straight, the two feelings they're allowed to show in society is either sexual desire or anger because of masculinity, you know, stuff. And so I think that a lot of times, in both communities, across the board, men often receive a message that a disconnect from your feelings. And so in some ways, you know, and also that it's like a feminine thing, right? And we all know growing up, the insults to young, you know, the number one insult is either that you're gay or that you're like a woman. The insult of being gay is that you're like a woman. So there's a connection.
Homophobia exists without misogyny.
Right. And so I think that, like, in a way, some gay men have a freedom from some of the masculine. In other ways, they don't, or it's hyper masculine. But they're more in touch with their feelings because they didn't have to be. They already were excluded from masculinity. But I do think that this people pleasing thing, which is common in many worlds and couples I see with sex addiction, is like I think it's the underbelly of the sex addiction. And often people who stop their behaviors and have long-term recovery, if they relapse later, that's the thing they didn't work on, is that people-pleasing piece, especially because if they have betrayed someone, they're in a one-down position in the relationship until it heals, because they want to. So then they're already in a one-down. But learning how to know your feelings, share your feelings in an appropriate, healthy, relational way, I think is, you know, hopefully as we continue to grow in all the world, people then can do that better, and then there's less need to hide themselves.
So I would think that feeling identification, Jeff, is a major topic for your group. Since this is,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the topic, actually.
I would think so, yeah. It's validating, and it helps somebody to know themselves.
Sure.
And that was a question I was going to ask. Knowing that I probably have a lot of stereotypes myself, loving gay men, don't want to have stereotypes. It's inherent in my age, my sex, my upbringing, blah, 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 blah. But I wondered if your groups had themes. You know, I mean, I have a Help Her Heal group for sex addicts, compulsive problematic sexual behavior, that helps them to, A, understand trauma, because their partner's been traumatized. Would you say that within the gay community, how do I say this, that since it's already set up that you can be with other people, I would still suspect that if there's that secrecy, which there can be, it feels like the same kind of betrayal.
Well, you asked me the question related to my group, and I said that I'm guessing you're asking this related to gay couples. Am I right?
Yes, since you said most of the men in your group are not necessarily in a relationship. Yeah.
They're single ones too, and I'm sorry. Could you ask the question again?
So I want to know if do you work with heterosexual couples?
I do, yes.
Good. Okay. So when there's been a betrayal, a sexual betrayal,
yeah,
do you think it's the same for heterosexuals versus gay relationships, considering, yes, I was going to say considering they can act out?
If they are in a monogamous relationship, a betrayal is the same.
Okay.
If they are consensually non-monogamous, then a betrayal could be different.
Okay.
And something that we talk about is, what are your bottom lines?
Mm-hmm.
What, not with our friends, not in our house, right? No dates, no romantic involvement. Mm-hmm. Things like that, and that needs to be clear, and that's part of the negotiation. Mm-hmm. I was working with one person in a couple. I saw him individually, and he and his partner of 7 or 8 years had a consensually non-monogamous relationship, and they shared about it explicitly. Mm-hmm. And he would ask his permission. I'm talking to this guy online. Here's his picture. What do you think? And the partner would more likely say, oh, that's great, go ahead. And then he would come back and tell them about it, and they would use that to fuel their own sex life. Mm-hmm. And it happened as they were open about it. It happened less. They would talk about it, and their sex life it maintained heat. Mm-hmm. Because they used it as a tool. There was no emotional threat there. Mm-hmm. It was, almost objectifying people as sex toys. Mm-hmm. Or their relationship. Mm-hmm. Which I don't know would be standard so much in heterosexual relationships, although it certainly could.
Mm-hmm. Well, it exists, but I don't think it's
sure.
Right? And I've had heterosexual couples also where there's an agreement, and everything is okay except for one thing, and then that gets betrayed. Mm-hmm. That betrayal hurts just as much as nothing is okay, and that gets betrayed, right? And I think that's what you're saying too, is that relationships are built on agreements and trust and love, and as you both said earlier, it's the trust which is the major wound more than the sexual. I mean, that's painful too, of course, but the trust. So independent of what gay or heterosexual people agree on, if the agreement and trust is broken, then the wound occurs, and each individual has their own flavor that they bring to their wounding. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that to what you said, Carol, too, is that, I think the building blocks of empathy that you talk about in your book, Help Her Heal, mm-hmm. are similar here with two men also, because the same wounds happen. And there's probably a masculine version of those wounds, in fact, when we deal with, if you have a same-sex male couple or a heterosexual couple where the woman was cheating and had the betrayal, right? Like men have their own version of like, I shouldn't be cheated on. I shouldn't be, so I think each gender has their own version of the I'm not enoughness or this, the way betrayal lands in its own way. And so it's the other person's job to have the right empathy for that.
Well, and I would suspect, here's another stereotype. I was going to say, that's my dog moving the rocker. Sorry about that.
Okay.
I would suspect that gay men would inherently have more empathy than heterosexual men. They're both looking at me like.
I'm looking at Jeff.
Well, they've been through so much, and they are talking feelings, and,
Well, I think that is a stereotype. I think men are supposed to suck it up and keep a stiff upper lip.
Even they're effeminate?
Not all gay men are effeminate. There's some gay football players or boxers,
So that incorrect, gay men in general are not more empathetic. Just in your opinions. I know that you're not that.
I think, like I said before, like men are from Mars. So, the genitalia of your partner, I don't think should make a difference.
Right, but my experience with heterosexual men is twofold. And I ask my groups this, I ask my couples this. Men lack empathy and have to be taught that. And I say, did they lack it all along because they weren't raised to have it, perspective taking of the opposite sex, and or did the addiction, since I work with addiction, rob them of that empathy? Because you can't really have empathy and then betray somebody.
I think it's really hard for men in ways that aren't talked about. I think men can't be too vulnerable because they'll be seen as weak and emasculated and not sexy. The man always needs to be seen as the winner, virile. I'm working with a heterosexual man who, because of medication, can't ejaculate. And so therefore, he won't have sex with his partner. Not that he doesn't want to, but he doesn't feel that, the money shot, right?
Right.
He can't deliver.
He can't complete.
And so therefore, he's not seen as, he can please her, but there's still a performative aspect that's expected. That's just one example.
Right. Well,
but I think pressure is put on men to not be too vulnerable. So empathetic is
vulnerable.
Something we would hope everyone would be, but it might be seen as emasculating.
Well, can I ask you a question, Carol, about what you said?
Yes, as long as you let me say something about your picture.
Good.
So this shows my age. I'm thinking that's Cassius Clay, which of course is Muhammad Ali. And part of my IRCM certification was that I interviewed people of different populations. And African American, well-educated women said exactly what you said about men, but she made it even more specific to the African American community because they had been so horribly abused. They had been slaves. They weren't about to show any empathy, vulnerability, because it could get them killed. And so when you said that about, you think men in general are discouraged from being vulnerable and having empathy, what I'm hoping is that we create a society that is safe enough that can happen. That's probably Pollyannish, but that's what I hope. And that we can all do that as clinicians, to explore that, which each and every client we've got. And, the greatest fighter in the world, Muhammad Ali, wow. I think I read his book. There was lots of vulnerability in there for him. So now, Gary, go ahead.
and he may have qualified for one of our groups. So like that's part of what I want to say. My experience has been, and I don't know if this is what you meant, but I really want to hear your opinion, is that men do have empathy, but and especially men who have like the sex addict, again, the stereotypical sex addict population are often very sensitive. The feeling in a recovery room for sex addiction is very different than an AA meeting. I always joke that in an AA meeting, they ask who wants to read the readings at the beginning of the meeting, and it's like, I do. And at a sex addiction meeting, it's like, oh, no, you. Oh, no, you. Oh, no, like, they're like overly people-pleasing, like we talked about before. And I think that they have a lot of empathy. They're often, I've come across that they often identify also, despite harming, trampling their partner's heart. If it's a woman, they identify as, very open-minded, feminist, protector of women, but yet they do these things that they have these attitudes that harm women, and it could be with men as well. But that the empathy gets blocked in the face of their behavior, and they're causing someone they care about pain mirrored back to them. So they can be empathetic if their spouse is like, my mother's driving me crazy. Empathy. Maybe sometimes if there's a game on or something else going on, maybe not. But when it's about them, that's when they lose. It's a shame.
Same thing. No, I know it is. I absolutely agree with you. And I'm telling you, I'm running a couples group for problematic sexual behavior and teaching them coping skills. And the men want to know how the other women feel.
Right.
Because that's one removed, and they can have more empathy. So I agree. And
you had, I think recently, didn't you have Maddie Corman on your podcast?
I did.
Yeah. So she and her husband were our clients. I mean, it's out there because we were in the program with them.
Right.
And when she had the play, and again now with the movie, many men who had betrayed their partners were able to hear that message from the movie and the play easier than their partners.
I get
exactly what you're saying. The same thing as hearing a different betrayed partners, because it's not hitting the shame button again the same way.
And I agree. I find that they do have empathy. Once that addiction piece is managed and their focus is on relationship building, they're hungry for it. And they've got it, but they're hungry for more.
Yeah, I find that part is harder than actually stopping the sexual behavior. Like the learning curve to know your feelings and then be able to have empathy for someone else while you're trying to be in touch with your feelings. It's such a steep learning curve. It's harder for many men, at least, maybe women too, in that position, than to stop acting out.
Well, guys, I cannot thank you enough. We're at the end of our time, and 90 seconds.
Yeah.
And it has been a riveting conversation. If you didn't roll your eyes at me, you might have wanted to a couple of times. And I knew, and I knew I was being vulnerable because I know that I don't know what I don't know. And when you know better, you do better. So I so appreciate this conversation. I hope we can have another one sometime.
That would be lovely.
Thank you so much, Carol.
Well, you're welcome. One last thing you'd like to say to our listening audience about this topic?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I was going to give you the floor, Gary.
I don't know. It's rare that I don't know what to say. I think people are people. Go ahead, Jeff.
I think we're more alike than we are different.
I love that. I love that. And did I hear him call you Jeffrey?
You did, yes.
Okay, Jeffrey, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure meeting you. And Gary, I love you to death. So thanks, and let's keep this conversation going, okay? I know my listening audience needs it. I need it, and the professionals that listen to the show need it. So thank you.
Have a wonderful night.
All right. Take care. Okay, so this was Sex Help with Carol the Coach. And as I say at the end of every show, there'll only be one of you at all times. Fearlessly have the courage to be yourself. See you next week.